In this episode of Resilient Business, I chat with Tristan Scott of Daylight Computer. Daylight Computer is one of the most exciting products I've seen in quite some time. It was created to address the addiction to technology and its effects on our physiology that we all face, especially our children. I hope this episode resonates with everyone as we can all benefit from lessening our exposure to the harmful effects of technology. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for more information on this exciting product. Now, here's my talk with Tristan Scott. I hope you enjoy. Tristan Scott, I'm really glad we could put this together today and have you here. So welcome. I just wanted to have you on and chat about some stuff that you're doing lately and a little bit about you and kind of how you got started in what you're currently involved with, and then get into some more details around that. So welcome in.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it was great to meet you in person the other week and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I know we put this together on a little bit of short notice, so that was awesome. Schedules aligned a little bit before I start going a little crazier with travel, and I'm sure you have things back to back as well. So it's really cool. I'm sitting in a cloudy day in Atlanta. You look like you're sitting in maybe a cold and sunny day in Wyoming, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Awesome. Well, good. So I think maybe start. I mean, I'd love to share how I originally ran into you and you guys and what you're doing with Daylight. And so maybe not as uncommon as people might think. I was introduced to you and Anjan and Daylight through going down kind of the Jack Cruz lane, which is either the passing lane or the shoulder, depending on who you're talking to, I guess. But it's been great, checking in on a lot of Jack's work and a lot of people that are kind of connected to him peripherally and directly and things like that for maybe the past 2 years or so. So I've been involved in the wellness business now for about 9 years, doing our stuff with PEMF. But the whole light and infrared and UV and circadian biology sort of genre has really struck a chord with me and, created a lot of new habits and things like that. So it's something that I'm starting to talk about with people more than some people might probably enjoy right up front. But I'm getting on that soapbox more and more each day. And so running into you was great, but originally just heard sort of Jack tell the story, even going back to the involvement with Nicole Shanahan and the story around her daughter, and how Jack tells that story, and just leading up to just kind of some of the origins. And I'm not sure how early on that was for Daylight, or if it was sort of once Daylight had already been started and things. So I don't know if you want to fill in any of that, or even if you want to chat about that at all. But that's kind of how I ran into you guys, and then just started looking into Daylight a little bit. So we could get into as much of that as you want, but maybe just start off with, sort of your origin into, starting things up with Daylight and how that all came about.
Yeah, for sure. So I've also been in the health and wellness space for quite some time after suffering one too many concussions at December 2017, actually, and then kind of went down a self-healing rabbit hole in 2018, and then, healed myself to a pretty good point. And after being debilitated for over a year on the day-to-day, really having to limit myself as like a 22-year-old when you should be able to do a whole lot with your life, and really got hooked on the fact that our environment is really working against us in terms of how we can function as humans on a day-to-day basis. And that's everything from the food, to the water, to the light, to the rest of the electromagnetic spectrum, to the technology, to our community, and just the way we interact as a society. And yeah, I just got really fascinated with this, and kind of early on was down the rabbit holes of like regenerative agriculture and the food system more so. But then I realized, I had a degree in electrical engineering, and my background could lend itself very useful to educating, talking, understanding more of the nuance in the more of the electromagnetic environment and how that's affecting our health. So kind of started going down those rabbit holes more and more. And yeah, eventually I started talking about that online, had a podcast, and actually as well, Dr. Cruz introduced me on my podcast to Unjin, who have been working on Daylight for 4 or 5 years before I met with him and really his life's work after graduating college. And it was kind of the perfect combination because I was looking on something to sink my teeth into. I had this unique background of electrical engineering, being on social media, talking about these topics, and also a business background in the semiconductor industry. So I knew how the kind of business of electronics worked. And immediately I knew what I was meant to do because for a while I really dialed in my lifestyle, like the food, the water, getting outside, getting the sun, all this good stuff. But I was spending more and more time on technology online. And I was realizing that was detracting from my experience on this planet. It was detracting from my day to day energy and how I felt. And it was a combination of me realizing that it didn't have to be that way. I knew it from an engineering perspective that you could design things differently. We could, have things that are more synergistic. But I also knew being in the semiconductor industry, how challenging it is to compete in like consumer hardware, consumer electronics. We're talking about the largest companies in the world, and they're directly incentivized through their business model, which is really like attention-based business model now, to make things as stimulating, as addicting, as attention capturing as possible. So it's just kind of like catch 22. We're spending more and more time online and on technology that's really working to make us the product, to make us being the ones that are being consumed, as opposed to really augmenting our experience on this planet. So meeting Unjin basically laid that all out, and he's like, yeah, I've been building something that's better, that actually can help change this. So immediately jumped on board 2 years ago, and it's been fantastic. We launched the Daily Computer, first product last year, and it's been going great. And I think it's a testament in general, whether it's technology from a hardware perspective, like lighting indoors. I mean, you talk about like how we have wireless internet, anything in our environment, we can actually design and build and create better solutions. We just need to first acknowledge that there's a problem and then have the support to go and execute on that. So that's where it's really exciting time, because more and more people are becoming aware that this is the reality we live in, and kind of the way our environment's designed right now is not very synergistic with humanity. And it's a challenge because we've kind of been pigeonholed into this, and it's going to take a lot of deliberate effort to get out of it, but it is very possible to improve things across the board.
Yeah, and when you're to your point on competing with some of the largest companies in the world, who have all the money, all the personnel, all the resources, and all the marketing, and not to mention in collaboration with other institutions to continue to push forward messages of convenience and productivity and comfort and all of the things that kind of were sold when we were sold the latest technology or the latest pharmaceutical or whatever it might be. It all has its promises to it, and then when you go to promote something like this that has a healthier alternative, you run into those headwinds. And it seems like there's a lot of collaboration against, the messaging sometimes. And so you end up, with a lot more exponential challenges than you might have had, had you tried something different, or especially tried something right in line with some of what those messages are. Those things tend to gain momentum, a lot more quickly, and are a lot more successful quickly with a lot less education and headwind to it. So I was going to ask you just a specific, have you run into any specific headwinds from any of those corporations or anything as far as like trying to suppress, your progress here?
Yeah, not really at this point. It's interesting because when we launched, we like looked at who ordered our product, and it was like Google, Amazon, Apple. They were all on the list. Meta, they all bought it. Some subset of those companies know that we exist. I'm sure that someone has a monitor of what we're doing, but at the end of the day, and this people ask, well, is Apple just going to buy you out, or couldn't they just do the same thing? Sure, if Apple did the exact same thing we're doing, that'd be great. But they sell 75 million iPads a year on the basis of the highest performance, the highest brightness, the highest color index, the best really stimulation that you can get in a personal electronic device. That's what they do. That's what they do best. They create this product. Really, the last iPad ad that came out, or the launch video, was like all of this stuff was coming out of the iPad, like all this creative, like art and games and toys and music.
Yeah.
And then it's shoved into this thing. And to me, that was like, that encapsulates this perfectly, right? It's like they're taking everything that is good and beautiful and creative and human, and it's now in this device that we hold 6 inches from our face and we give our children at 2 years old. When in reality, we want it to be the exact opposite. We want devices that are less, so that you can actually experience all of that wonderful fulfillment, stimulation, creativity, love, passion in the real world, like in real life. And that's the ultimate disconnection. And if people think that they're just going to all of a sudden switch their business model to not being attention based, I open the suggestion box that could happen, but I'd be very, very, not confident that that's going to be a reality, because they have no incentive to do so.
Miraculous,
and they've
but not reality.
They've perfected this. It's a monopoly on the business model of these companies. That's where we sit. So no, there haven't been any specific threats. I'd say the biggest hurdle in general is getting support from a capital perspective and getting off the ground. Like we're doing very much organic marketing predominantly, and it's really just a scale thing. Raising money from investors has been a challenge. And that's where it's like, you just need to find mission aligned people. Like we haven't taken any money from traditional venture capitalist funds because, one, they don't get what we're doing, and two, this doesn't fit the mold of what they do in terms of investment playbooks. So is that deliberate? Is that not? It doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's been a challenge for us, but we're here, we're doing well now, and we're only going to be able to do more as we grow and the community grows around this movement, that if tech is less, you can be more.
Yeah, and I think just in general, the population is sort of moving slowly into more understanding of, the detrimental effects of some of this technology and some of the other things in our lifestyle and in our environment. And, I kind of work in an echo chamber to some degree. So a lot of my contacts and friends and customers and people I meet at conferences and things kind of are of the same mind. But there's still education that's involved. And to a point you made, just got me thinking about when I first heard Anjan speak about this on some video. I was really intrigued when he just started talking about trying to create a tool that was more of a tool and not an addiction. And, where somebody could pick it up, use it, here we go, make some notes, do whatever they need to do. When they're done with their work, I think the phrase he actually used was, you put it in a drawer, close the drawer, and go outside and go enjoy what you just described, being outside, enjoying relationships, travel, the sunshine, nature, all of those things. And I think people just need to understand that if they are going to make that sort of switch in their lifestyle, I think people look at it as too big of a hurdle sometimes. They want the benefits that go along with it. They may even understand that not being connected to those things and to nature have a role in how they're feeling, these days. Let's say if they're suffering from something or dealing with some kind of health condition, or their children are. But the light environment and being in nature isn't necessarily the first thing they think of. Not even necessarily. It's not usually the first thing they think of as a remedy for that. And so, I think you guys are doing a great job, along with some others that are out there, in terms of really educating people. And I want to try to impress upon people that your life really doesn't have to change that much, and the benefits you get from it far outweigh will far advance you from how you're feeling today, perhaps, and where you just can't figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, you can go into the weeds of the science, and yeah,
Yep.
that's where the physics and engineering and biology backgrounds are helpful. But at the end of the day, what's occurred is we have been disconnected from the real world. And that's the combination of the natural world, outdoors, nature, sunlight, fresh air, connection to the earth, and then also like humanity, like social connection, human connection that matters in real life, instead of just this communication through the digital medium, which is really intangible for us to grasp.
Mhm.
And that's what it boils down to, right? And I think everyone can wrap their heads around that. Like we talk about, daylight kids and how kids are now growing up on iPads. Most moms know that screen time is a large issue. They don't know anything about circadian biology or the light spectrums and how that's affecting their kids. They just know that the iPads are really consuming and stimulating, but they're stuck in this sticky situation where it's really challenging to be a mother. And, it can be very helpful to have a device in
Sure.
your kid's hand for some time, and then they want them to learn in this digital world because that's clearly the future of humanity, is we're not going to go backwards. So how do we consume this really world's knowledge that we have at our fingertips in a more deliberate way? Because it's too much. It's like when you hand the thing over to you raw, you can't handle it. Adults can't handle it. I can't handle it. I can't have Instagram
Sure.
on my phone because it's just too good. It's too exciting for my dopamine reward system.
Yep.
And what we can do, however, is we can curate an environment digitally to consume this and minimize the detractions. And that's all we're trying to do at Daylight. We're like a filter for getting getting the good of the internet, getting the good of social media and AI,
Mhm.
because they are incredible learning tools. The amount, I mean, like yourself, myself, so many people in this space have learned in such a short period of time. I mean, now with AI tools, you can research things that would have taken you years in
For sure.
minutes or in an hour. And
For
that's
sure.
incredible. That's wonderful. But the problem is most people are now using that to write their emails or asking for relationship advice, or,
Mhm.
they're scrolling on TikTok and Instagram all day. So it's like, how do we separate these out? And for us, the only way to do that is to change the interface and curate the way you're interacting with it to filter all of the overstimulating, designed to be addictive means out of the way.
Yeah, and in the meantime, to your point, the parents hand the kid an iPad because it helps them with time, and it sort of lets the parent get back to what they're doing, and so it occupies the child. And then when they remove the iPad and it's time for the child to go outside or take a nap or do anything else, frankly, even sit down for a meal, the kid usually will, resist that or worse.
Mhm.
And, the parent might think, well, maybe I'm feeding the kid too much sugar, and that's why they're acting like this. They never kind of realize that it might be the device itself that is creating this. And it's not even like a different type of toy. Like if you were to give a little boy a toy train to play with and then you took it away from him and he didn't like that you were taking it away, it's really not the same as taking the iPad away. The train's not addicting him physiologically, whereas the iPad is. There might be some other reason. Maybe it is too much sugar in that scenario with the train, or something else. But I don't think people. It's just, again, it's just not something people consider right away as having a dramatic effect on physiology, and that includes their kids. And I hate to say, I hate to think that, I don't know if you have any ideas or data on this anywhere, but the younger the kids are getting the technology, as you pointed out earlier, the effects on them years down the road is probably not linear. I would just guess.
You're spot on. Yeah. So I had my intuition, of course, that's like screen time bad for young kids. And I know why from certain perspective, they're more biologically sensitive, they're smaller. But when you actually go and look at the research more in depth, there's actually a lot of mainstream research that's showcasing exactly what you just said. And the summary is basically the younger they get screen time, 1 years old, 2 years old, And then the longer the duration that they're using it at that young age is going to be directly related to the delays of developmental progression. So, language development, communication skills, cognition, and it's not linear. No, it can be like drastically different if you give it to them at like 1.5 years old already for an hour a day. And that sounds insane, but that's not uncommon now. And some daycares have this, and again, it depends on the family. But when you just go to like the airport and you're traveling, you actually start to notice it, because I'm not around like a lot of young kids all the time, and I'm trying to learn a lot more by talking to parents, teachers, schools, etc. And it is actually very common. But there's a lot of research showcasing the prevalence of ADHD directly correlated with screen time. It's like 8x for those that are spending more time on screens at younger ages. And the list goes on and on. And what I'm interested about is like, what is the actual biological, physiological differences? And yeah, their bodies are smaller. So the intensity of the light, the EMFs in general, the stimulation is far greater. They're holding it closer to their eyes, to their face. And overall, they have this developing biology. They actually have developing retinas that let in more of the high energy visible blue light, which is the most stimulating, like 40 to 50% more, which is astounding. And you think about, take a step back, why may that be the case? Well, what are children? What are they doing? They're designed to be innately curious. They're wonderful, they're beautiful, they're pure, because they're trying to map out their environment so that they understand how to get the lay of the land in the world that they're growing up in, so that they can be successful and survive as teenagers, as adults. But now that sensitivity, that environmental sensitivity, gets hijacked by the devices. So now their biology just wants to live in that digital world. So when you pry it away from them, it's like ripping them out of the video game. Like they're literally almost like an augmented reality type experience because of how biologically sensitive they are. And that's the real tragedy, right? And I think we don't even really know, because it's been so recent that we've changed this. It's only been since COVID, really, that we've started to give kids tablets and screens such a young age. And then in schools, one-to-one learning now as early as kindergarten. And we can have a good guess of the repercussions, but we really don't even know how bad it could be in 5 to 10 years of this once they get older, how much different they're going to be from a developmental perspective, from an interrelationship perspective, and a mental and physical health perspective.
For sure.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And I think now is the time we need to intervene. We need to course correct. And what's been exciting for me, being in the field, talking to parents, moms, schools, teachers, people want to change, but they just don't know what to do. It's like the genie's out of the bottle. Once you give the kid the iPad, he just wants the iPad. Once the schools have one-to-one learning, like you can't really go backwards as easily as you went forwards. But
that's what I was going to say.
That's the problem to solve.
If you could ideally have some kids that have not received their technology yet, and you could start from ground zero with something like the Daylight kids, and then go down 2-3 years, and then make those comparisons developmentally or however you want to look at it. Just assuming that everybody else in the population is going to be completely saturated. And so you'd probably have to find, I don't know, some homeschool parents or somebody who, minimizes not only the iPad use, but also TV use and computer use throughout the house. Because I think one of the challenges here, especially with adults, obviously, is people are used to, as I've heard you describe it on another podcast, looking at your phone home screen, your iPhone, it looks like a bowl of candy. And I think I've heard you say that. And you just want to be with that thing. And the more you use it, obviously, as an adult all day long, the more resistance or education or need, I guess, from a health standpoint, let's say, if that's the trigger for you, to move to something like a Daylight. But a kid who hasn't experienced the technology fully yet, because they're so young, is now handed a Daylight kids. I think now you're going to make a lot more progress a lot more quickly, with a kid like that. But that's the trick, getting that into their hands first or into their eyes first, however you might want to look at it. So,
Absolutely. It makes it a lot easier, right? And they don't care that it's a bit more boring if they don't have a,
they don't
a
have a reference
benchmark,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
reference point.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean you can't, like, if you have kids that use iPads, they will certainly take a daylight computer over nothing, and
Mm,
eventually they'll change. Like, we can adapt very quickly. And what's cool is I think there's more and more studies coming out. Is like, if you take 2 weeks break of all online exposure, social media exposure, this is adults speaking, it sets back your cognition like a decade. Like, it basically undoes like a quote unquote decade of cognitive aging.
wow.
So as sensitive and as enthralled in these digital worlds as we are, if we change our relationship with them, we can improve very quickly. The human body is extremely adaptable,
Yeah.
resilient, and that's just the key, to know that. But I will say, for children, so much of their development is occurring before the age of 5, before the age of 8 to 9. So those are really the key years to think about a deliberate environment to curate for them, so that they can have as much success as possible, as humans when they're older.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, to give parents that kind of window and say, look, if you just focus on this for the first 5 6 years of your child's life, you're going to be so far ahead, and you won't even imagine what type of benefits they'll see down the road from that. So, no, that's all awesome. Um, do you have a daylight on you right now?
Yes,
can we
yes, I
can we
do.
talk about that? Show it a little
We
bit.
sh-
Go
we
through it.
should, yeah, we should. So the whole premise, right? Like, we're talking about technology being bad for
Mhm.
us, and it's overstimulating. It's designed to be addictive. Why is that the case? Why is it not good? Why is screen time not good? I think that's the best place to start. And I really boil it down to a few key reasons, and that the Las Vegas casino is the best analogy that I always give. And that's because casinos are really all about environmental design. They're not just about the games. I mean, even you land in Las Vegas, you go down the strip, what do you see? Bright flashing lights
Everywhere.
everywhere.
I'll
And
be
you
there
walk
next
in a
week.
casino. Oh, there you go. Good luck. I'll be
Thank you.
there in January. I'm not looking forward to it. But you go into a casino, there's no windows, there's
Mm,
no sunlight from the outdoors coming in, even the distorted glass spectrum.
yep.
There's no clocks
No
really.
clocks.
There's free alcohol, there's a lot of stimulation from people, and then it's the highest density of bright flashing lights in existence. And then there's the game, there's the poker table, there's the slot machine. So you sit down at the slot machine thinking, oh, it's just this game. And of course, the game itself, blaring these lights, and it has this reward mechanism built into it. But you've already been primed from the moment you sit down at that slot machine for it to be very challenging for you to get back up.
Sure.
And that is the same thing with our phones, our devices today. They've designed them very intentionally so that it's extremely convenient, but there's also bright flashing lights at you all day long. And it's blue light dominant. So we have the most dopaminergic, stimulating form of light. It's very absent in the longer wavelengths, the restorative red and infrared light. The light is flickering on and off to control brightness, and whether that's intentionally done or not, it's a fact. And that's another stressor for our eyes, for our brain, for our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like on edge. Everyone's on edge in fight or flight all the time. And then what happens when your nervous system is kind of in a super sympathetic dominant fight or flight state? Well, you want easy wins. You want like the sweets, you want the carbs, you want the internet, you want the cheap dopamine, because you're in this scarcity mindset because of the environment they've programmed for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what your body is going to want to look for, because it's kind of in that survival mode. And then inherently, you use all of these devices. We do all our work indoors, and that's because they're not designed to be used outdoors. And that started with TVs, regular desktop computers, I mean, factory jobs. But now we spend even less time outdoors. And technology not being synergistic with the real natural world is a big reason for that. You can't see the screen outside. The battery is terrible. It overheats if you try and work in the sun.
For
So you
sure.
can't even get the benefits of nature really with modern technology. So at Daylight, we're like, okay, how do we take all of those reasons and build solutions around them?
Yep.
So we invented a new display technology that's similar to a Kindle in the fact that it's e-paper, it's paper-like, and there's no color. And that's cool because we were very motivated and inspired by the Kindle, by the e-readers of the world, that they're different. They don't scream for your attention. They're black and white, they're grayscale. They work outside. The battery life's incredible.
Yep.
And they don't have all of this Las Vegas casino type feel to it. But the problem with those products are they're too slow to be used for anything other than reading and writing. And that's why they've all been e-readers for over a decade.
Yeah.
So our display technology, which we invented, allows us to get that paper-like feeling, but at a super snappy, super fast refresh rate.
Yep.
So now we can do anything on the internet. We have a modified custom version of Android, you can download any app in the Google Play Store, and you can go on the internet and social media, but it's in this like digital newspaper type experience. So it's far less stimulating, it's far less attracting. You can still doom scroll, but it's just like you don't want to as much because you're not getting the eye candy from the light coming off of it. It's more of like a book. It's more like a notebook. And that's where like physically taking notes is really important. And there's research that proves that physically taking notes, physically reading a book versus screens is much better for memory retention, which isn't a huge surprise. But it's like, how do we get the analog experience in a digitally convenient form factor? And that was the whole goal with Daylight. And then at nighttime, unlike all these other e-readers, they have, some of them have backlights, but then they're still blasting this cold, harsh, white LED light with flicker.
Yep.
Our backlight's amber in tone so that there's no blue light, there's no flicker. It's warm. It's not going to disrupt your sleep as much. And overall, if you're on a screen late at night, whether that's for reading, researching, or doing work, it's not going to disrupt your biological rhythms. And that's the key, because a lot of people will be like, well, just stop using screens after 7 p.m. And I would love to say, that sounds amazing.
Wow.
Sign me up for that.
Yeah,
but
who are these people?
A lot of people work,
right.
And they work hard. They're passionate about what they do. And that is something. It's like, we just need to have a better
before
solution.
sunrise, you know,
Before, people get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and are really working hard. So that's kind of what we've built. We invented a new display technology that changes the interface with the digital world to be much less. And we put that in a 10.5-inch tablet as our first product. We're building a custom software environment to support those same principles. No notifications by default. It doesn't show you that you have 35 tabs open. You're not going to get the pop-up ads. We're stripping all of that out, and that's just getting started, so that when you're actually in a work surface area, whether it's reading, writing, creating, you won't be as likely to be pulled out of it. It's distraction proof. And that's the key, right? That's productivity. And that's actually creativity, which has been completely stolen from us because we don't have free moments to think anymore. You go to the bathroom, you're on your phone, you're like, have 2 minutes before a meeting, you're on your phone. But those moments of going for a walk or being deep in thought on we call it a digital typewriter, where the screen's not going to disrupt that creative flow is really what we need to get back to, because that's kind of been stripped away because of these devices. So that's the overview. And then we have now a kids version, which is basically the same thing, but we got a fun kids case. And we just have like a different software experience. Hard to see here, but same exact hardware, similar software, but we have like parental controls. We have curated recommended apps.
That's
and
awesome.
You can lock it down. It'll block mature content ads, because we do believe the Daylight is the best first device to give to children. And we're not going to say what age that should be, but knowing that they're going to get it in public school, they're going to get it anyway, experience from friends, family, etc. that inevitably they do need to learn how to interact with the digital world.
Hmm.
They should do so very supplementary, very gradually in a low stimulation way. And we think the daylight currently is the best way to do that.
Fantastic. Yeah, well said. I've had mine for, shoot, I think uh, they were shipping a little bit slow when I got mine. So I think waited like 3, 4 months for it. But when I finally got it, I jumped in and I use it every day. My use case are a few things. Obviously, I'm on regular technology as well, my phone, my monitor, what have you. But this really fits a gap for me in terms of before sunrise. I'm a big believer in, you should minimize artificial light before sunrise and after nightfall. And so after and before those times, I'm on my red light, on my daylight, with the backlit screen if I'm inside. Yeah. And for sure, you can watch YouTube, you can watch videos, you can do emails, Gmail, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever. So you could still message, you could do a lot of productivity type tasks right on there. And then during the day, I'll grab it. If I want to write notes, like podcast notes, I'll just jot them down with the stylus. And then I've just recently gotten myself a little setup with a stand and with a wireless keyboard. So now I can sit, and I'm planning on, once it's not 40 degrees and raining in Atlanta, I'll be able to sit on my deck middle of the day, have a little station, and sit and work. And so it fills a couple of really good niches for me. And so to me, it's a health tool, yes, but it is also a productivity tool. I mean, you could do a lot of stuff with this thing. And I think that's part of the conversation in getting people, new people, to understand this is not like as major of a shift as you might think. And, the biggest trade off is not having all of the rainbow of colors. But when you think about how the physiological effects are one versus the other, I think a lot of people, depending on how intelligent they are, they will make the connection that, look, there aren't that many trade-offs to this. It's still great for productivity. I can use it for circadian health after dark, before sunrise. This is going to get me down the path in terms of improving my health. And I think there are so many people out there that are dealing with health issues, and they're looking under pretty much every rock that they can look under, except the light and the non-native EMF rocks. Those are kind of the last frontier of stones to be overturned, and they might have the biggest impact out of any of those stones that they turn over the course of decades in some people's lives. So I think for the people who look at my work and are connected to what I'm doing, I think if you're a professional and you're treating and working with patients and clients, and maybe you're a chiropractor or a functional medicine doc or somebody on the nutritional side, you're constantly trying to help people with their goals in terms of improving their health, whether it's digging out of a hole, a big hole, a small hole, or just trying to optimize. And I think this fits into all of those categories. And I think you can cut off a lot of low-hanging fruit if somebody's even going through something that they've been dealing with for a while, just by changing their light habits. And this is a great tool to sort of bridge that gap and get into that new routine, that new lifestyle. So that's kind of the sort of wrapped up reasons why I was so attracted to this and why I just want to help promote it for you guys.
Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, you summarized it quite well, right? And the reason why I feel like light and EMFs and the electromagnetic inputs are almost fringe topics, but they seem to be becoming more and more
Mm,
popular, especially the light side,
mm,
is they're less tangible. We don't really we see visible light. We don't even see ultraviolet and infrared.
right.
We don't feel them in the same way like when we eat food or drink water,
Hmm.
for example. So it's just harder for us to grasp. But slowly, these have actually changed. Our electromagnetic environment has changed far, far greater than anything else, and especially in the last 10 years, I would say. And we're seeing the results of that. And it goes back to just the simplistic thing, like go outside in nature for a weekend, or even a full day, like no technology, just fresh air, full sunlight, grounding, and low EMF environment naturally, you're going to feel a lot better. Your nervous system's going to relax. You're going to be able to take deep breaths for the first time in a while if you get out of the city or wherever you live. And that's all I kind of have to say here, right? To try that out and see how you feel. Most people would always immediately feel a lot better, but you can go down the rabbit holes and understand why these things have such a drastic impact on our physiology. And it's because really everything is downstream from light and electromagnetic inputs because we're consuming them 24/7, 365 days a year, like all the time. It's not just like we're eating 3 4 times a day. And it's really setting the timing of our internal systems. And every system that exists really needs to be a symphony in terms of timing for execution and telling hormones to fire and be released and synthesized, and all of the energy and systems that go on in the body are dictated by timing. So
Mm,
it's light that's setting that timing to the highest degree, and it's light that's been distorted so much. And we really just have a case where we should have very bright days and very dull or dark nights,
mhm.
but now we have very dull days and very bright nights.
Mm,
Relatively, it's pretty much
sure.
the same throughout.
Constant.
It's like the
Hmm.
same environment, and our bodies, nature, everything life wise is cyclical.
Hmm.
And that cyclicality has been removed because we've just standardized things. And
Yeah.
in the name of energy efficiency and technological progression, we have removed ourselves from that kind of natural ebb and flow, the yin and yang of nature, the restorative
Yeah.
periods. And that's where people's health suffers as a result of that. So it may seem common to need to drink 4 cups of coffee to get through the day, have some sort of come down supplement or sleep aid routine. But in reality, that's not normal for us to need to rely on these external crutches. But because our environment has changed so drastically, that's kind of the reality we live in now. And there's so many things that affect the way our body feels on a day-to-day basis. But I do believe, um, the light, the electromagnetic environment drastically shifting is one that we're going to look back and realize how foolish that really was to completely shift things. And it
Mm,
also goes, like I said, the camping example is based on feel. It's like when you have these cold white LEDs, the headlights, for example, at nighttime, or at just swapping a cold bulb for a incandescent or a warm LED, you automatically feel just a bit better, a bit more at ease, and you don't need to read any scientific literature to
you really
understand.
don't. No, you really don't. And it's not only light too, but another thing that people just, have we've made it so homogeneous, I guess, the is the climate, the temperature in our homes.
Yes.
And, people just and humanity, whether you think humanity's been here for billions of years or thousands of years or even hundreds of years, it's only been very recently that we didn't control all these environmental things. And so it doesn't take a genius, although it does take some education for a lot of people to kind of make that leap and say, well, wait a second, you're right. It's like we have controlled probably a lot more than we really should. And if we removed some of that control and maybe started to use tools that can still help us, but not expose us to that level of homogeneity, I guess is the word, where everything is super controlled, super consistent, and constant. Maybe that's just not, to your point, the way our physiology was developed and designed to respond
Yeah.
properly.
It's an interesting conundrum, right? Because
Yeah.
we've now become reliant on so many modern conveniences that ultimately, like, not to be dramatic, but enslave us to this like lifestyle, right?
Mm,
It's like, yeah, I try and keep my house like 50 to 60 degrees in the winter because I think that's more consistent. In the summer, peak summer, it'll be 75 in my house
mm,
because, and I naturally adapt. Like our bodies are very capable of adaptation that's
But you
especially
lose
depending
that
on your
ability,
heritage.
don't you?
But
That
yes,
weakens.
we lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel better as a result of that on a day-to-day basis. You're able to shift into the seasonal ebb and flow of things. But because of convenience and just what we're used to from a comfort perspective, that's like foreign to us.
Yeah.
And it is driving consumerism at the highest level as well. But it's this interesting scenario where we're so we have so many conveniences, we're so comfortable, yet our nervous systems are like so fight or flight when there's not real threats. They're these kind of just manufactured moments because we've dictated this environment for us. And it's very strange to think about this, but it makes total sense
Total
when you
sense.
realize kind of how we got to where we are right now.
Yeah. And even another example of this is sunglasses. The use of sunglasses by most of the population, I don't think people understand that that can limit their ability to adapt again to the natural light of the sun. And so I've even seen some studies out there where the more the more sunglass use leads to more sunburn and more harm from UV light in some cases. I don't know if I have that right, but I think I've seen some studies out there that would suggest that even using sunglasses and blocking that light just because of what it can do in your body and what ends up happening if you block it. Just a regular convenience, everyday convenience makes you feel a little bit more, like maybe your vision is a little bit better if it's bright out. And yeah, if it's, if you're on the water, if you're on the snow, or if it's super glary, then that might be one thing if you don't just have a hat to put on. But, I've noticed that I haven't worn sunglasses personally in probably 10 or 12 years, and I never have to put them on. And I'm out on the golf course with my son, and even if I'm out in the
And you
snow,
have light eyes, right?
and
So
I do have green eyes. So
yeah,
yeah, and it's same with sunscreen. If I'm not blocking the sun and I have good sort of sun habits, um, the need to wear sunscreen and to block that sun really goes away. There's a little
hmm
bit of a sort of a learning curve, and then kind of a developing a callus, I guess. But so there's a process. Um, but if you understand what that means to your physiology, I think a lot of people, if they just would understand that, they would they would move towards that because it just makes sense.
totally. And our bodies are insanely impressive, highly complex systems that they know how to solve any problem. We
Yeah,
just need to get
get
out of
out of
the
the
way
way.
sometimes. And that's where this whole less is more approach is the key. And don't get me wrong, there are certain, conditions, afflictions that need like specific treatment that's more targeted. But overall, our bodies are extremely resilient, they're adaptable, and they know what to do. But we've just weighed them down completely with these external crutches that you could say are conveniences. The sunglasses is a great example, just solar callus in general, and there's so many more. But that's where we're trying to get back to just allowing biology, nature to function as it wants to,
Mm,
without us getting in the way of everything. And that goes along with like our minds. Like you mentioned productivity being actually something that can be augmented by using a daylight or low stimulation screen. And that is exactly what we say, because if you get out of the way, the thoughts can then flow through.
yep.
But if you have all this distraction stimulation, it's going to kind of take away from that ability.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about signal to noise ratio more on the engineering
Yeah.
side, the electrical side, and things. And so that's a big thing where we're just it's like we're walking through this dense forest of distraction. um, taking the paradigm of something that's distracting rather than good for you, walking through a forest. But we just are hit all day long with these environmental stressors, and I really do believe it has a lot to do with limiting, or it has the ability to limit our creativity, our ingenuity. Um, our intuition and just the way we interact with people. I mean, that's a whole other podcast perhaps, but but as we wrap up here, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to, talk if you have anything else to say about daylight. I know people are going to be interested in learning more about this. They can go through me for that, obviously, and I'll point them in the right direction. But what are some suggestions that you have, or some last things to sort of tie up that message?
Yeah, and I appreciate this, Joe, very much. I think for us at Daylight is just that we're getting started. We have one product. We just launched a kids version, so we have kind of like two products. But overall, we see this as we need to overhaul the entire environment that we're living in. And yes, the tablet is one example of that. A product can actually help you get back to an environment that's better for you, that allows you to become a better version of yourself. But there's indoor lighting, there's other consumer hardware products, there's so much environmental design. Getting back to the casino example, that we want to do the opposite of that. How do we bring nature, technology, humanity actually together? And that's really the mission at the core. So if you're wondering what we're all about, that's kind of it. And we're really thankful for the early supporters, and we're really excited to get out there from an awareness perspective that you can actually be a lot better version of yourself if you're not giving it back, giving all your energy, attention, your life force back to these companies, back to the digital world, where it just goes into really nothing meaningful, I would say. And I think what you just wrapped up there is ultimately, maybe it's a bit controversial, but I think that is like dehumanizing. It's taking away from what it means to be humans. So we need to take that back, and we need to have some pride in taking that back. Like this is a serious issue. And what can you do in the meantime? Well, spending more time outside in the natural world, focusing on in-person relationships, trying to shift your environment to be a bit more synergistic, getting warmer, dimmer lights at nighttime, being deliberate about internet use, device use. There's a lot of tools now. There's blue light blocking tools, there's software filters, there's screen timers, there's physical limitations. We love all that stuff. We think they're great, but we also think that none of them are really addressing the root cause of the devices themselves. But try and just make small progressions in that direction, and I think you'll realize that, oh wow, it was actually pretty bad. And if you do have children in your life, think about how is it possible to give them a more intentional experience of childhood that's play-based, that's nature-based, that's family-centric. And when screen time is brought up, how can you do it in a curated way? You can, even if you have an iPad, turn it on grayscale, turn it on red mode to get rid of the blue light, make it just educational, certain apps only. There's a lot you can do outside of just saying hey, you need to buy a daylight computer, because we're not solving every problem, and you can actually make a lot of progress by just thinking about how you interact with your environment a bit more intentionally. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I just think there's so much low-hanging fruit out there for something like this, and that's why sort of I'm so kind of intrigued and engaged by it. It's a great tool to use inside. It's a great tool to use outside. And so if you're looking to get outside more, you will not see a better screen than the daylight screen in bright sunlight. And so if you're sick of squinting at your phone to try to figure out what you're what you're emailing or texting when you're in the bright sunlight, that's a great thing that the daylight is awesome at, because it just gets easier to see the brighter it is outside, which is one of the things I love about it too. And we all want to be outside in the brightness all the time. So Tristan, I really appreciate this. Short notice. It's great getting to know you a little bit better. Love the product. And I'm glad you could be here today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And if you want to add it in, but our website's daylightcomputer.com, kids website, kids.daylightcomputer.com.
Awesome. So, yeah, we'll include all that stuff. Appreciate it. Thanks again.